that she misled the American people over and over and over again while under federal investigation. While police departments in several U.S. cities are dealing with these protests, the country today turned its attention to Dallas, Texas, and a key moment for President Obama. For 7.5 years, our nation's first black president has found himself at the epicenter of the stories involving race and justice in America, at times in part based on his own words, such as suggesting wrongly early on in his presidency that police acted stupidly by arresting a prominent black Harvard professor following a confrontation at that professor's home. You may recall that resulted in the so-called beer summit between the president, Vice President Biden, Professor Henry Louis Gates, the man who had been confronted by police, and Cambridge Police Sergeant James Crowley. Then there was President Obama's decision to insert himself into the controversy surrounding the fatal shooting of Trayvon Martin in Florida, saying, quote, "If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon." 2 years later, the president would inject his administration again into a legal matter, the shooting case involving Michael Brown and police officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri, sending in his Justice Department and dozens of FBI agents, even enlisting the help of the fiery activist Reverend Al Sharpton, who helped perpetuate the story that Michael Brown, who was black, died with his hands up begging for his life, a story that turned out to be a blatant lie, which Al Sharpton refuses to admit to this day. Then 5 days ago, 5 police officers were gunned down by a madman who not only hated cops, but specifically said he wanted to target white cops. And at the memorial service for those fallen officers today, President Obama again stepped into the breach.
Race relations have improved dramatically in my lifetime. Those who deny it are dishonoring the struggles that helped us achieve that progress. But we know but America, we know that bias remains, although most of us do our best to guard against it and teach our children better. None of us is entirely innocent. No institution is entirely immune. And that includes our police departments. As a society, we choose to underinvest in decent schools. We allow poverty to fester so that entire neighborhoods offer no prospect for gainful employment. We flood communities with so many guns that it is easier for a teenager to buy a Glock than get his hands on a computer or even a book.
Was struck by the turn that he made, and especially by that last comment that he made that you showed on the air, where he said, you know, that it'd be easier for a teenager to get a Glock pistol than to get a gun or even a book. Now that's nonsense. But it was in furtherance of the agenda that he was talking about you know, spending in the inner cities, about gun control and all the rest of it. And I was frankly disappointed that he chose to go in that direction. You know, the president has a problem in the sense that to him, I think, racism in America has a white face, never a black face. That's why you heard him say in the aftermath of the hideous murders of the policemen in Dallas that we might never be able to untangle the motives of the shooter. The shooter's motives were perfectly clear. He said them in his conversations with the police, that he wanted to kill police and he wanted to kill white people. I'm not saying the president would deny that that's what he said, but the president's reaction to it suggests that he glosses over these sorts of things. The same way, Megan, that when it comes to the hideous violence against blacks, black-on-black violence in cities like Chicago and Baltimore and others, the president has been virtually silent on that issue, though far more black lives are lost in that way than are ever lost to incidents involving police shooting.
Anti-cop protesters have been popping up all across the country after select incidents with law enforcement, and one activist has also protested before, get this, in Ferguson and Baltimore, is now in McKinney, Texas. Now, since yesterday, he has tweeted, quote, "I've seen so many people here in McKinney who I've seen march in Ferguson and Baltimore and Milwaukee and D.C. Another tweet reads, well, we'll make we the protesters into a 501c3 one day soon, hopefully, in order to sustain this work. And no, I won't be getting rich." And finally, another reads, "Shut down McKinney." Now, based on those posts, is it fair to say that there may be professional protesters at all of these incidents? Joining me now is the author of those tweets, activist DeRay McKesson is with us, and also from the Black Sphere, Kevin Jackson. All right, DeRay, you say that. Were you at all three incidents?
I've been to many cities where the police have been violent towards people of color, and there have been many people who've traveled around the country in solidarity to stand with people to make sure that these stories don't go unnoticed.
I asked you if you've traveled. And you've been in Ferguson? You've been in Ferguson, right?
Correct.
And you've been in Baltimore?
Correct.
And you've been in McKinney?
I've been in many places where the police have either killed people or continued to be violent towards people of color.
So you're a professional. Is this what you do for a living? You want to set up a 501c3 tax-exempt organization? Is this your profession now?
You know, I'm somebody who's focused on justice. Is this a question that you are asking me because I'm a person of color? Would you ask white people this too?
This sort of question has nothing to do with race. It has to do with, is this your profession? I ask you, you know, you're tweeting out that you're a professional protester. Is that what you do? You want money.
Well, no,
you're soliciting money.
If you've actually looked at my tweets, you've heard me say that I'm actually unemployed. You want this to be that narrative?
Well, how do you support yourself then? How do you support yourself, sir?
I would encourage you to look at the rest of my tweets because I've answered this question many times.
How do you support yourself if you're unemployed?
Look at tweets. You're here.
How do you get the money to travel to all these places?
So, Sean, will you keep yelling or will you let me answer?
I didn't yell once yet, but I'll be glad to. If you want to hear me yell, it's pretty loud.
Yep. So, Sean, behave. So, here's the thing: is that, like I said, I've been using my savings and contributions from my friends to do this work so far, and that has worked. Again, when I go to different places, and when many people go to different places, this is about making sure that these stories are heard and that we're standing in solidarity with people who the police have harmed or killed.
All right, I got your point. Now I want to ask you this. Have you been a part of any of the rioting? Have you been a part of any of the looting, sir?
That's a good question. So I've actually not seen any rioting at all. So
you haven't seen it? I've got the video. If you'd like to look in your monitor, I can show it to you, sir. A lot of minority store owners lost their entire life possessions in these riots.
So, Sean, I'd encourage you to let me answer the question. So, again, I've not been a part of any rioting. There has been property damage in some cities, and again, I've not participated in that. And like I've said before, is that I don't have to condone it to understand it.
Who robbed a store and assaulted a clerk and according to the eyewitnesses, fought a cop for his gun and charged at a cop, do you still believe that false and proven false narrative of hands up, don't shoot? Do you believe that?
I think that Michael Brown should be alive today, and I think that he was murdered by a cop who used his power because he knew that power would be protected.
Kevin, I guess we have professional protesters. I mean, nice way to make a living, I guess.
Well, the first thing I'd say is that
don't lie.
The first thing I'd say to DeRay is he had tweets out that talked about he hadn't been paid yet, and he was waiting to be paid. But if he denies that he hasn't been paid, fine. But here's what I will tell you about DeRay.
Kevin, again, that's not true.
Hey, let me finish. You haven't been to the funeral of any cop that was killed in the line of duty. I bet you that. I bet you haven't saved up for that. I bet you haven't been to the celebration ceremony of cops who've protected many, many black people for decades. I bet you've never been to one of those celebrations. I bet you haven't been to the funeral of any of the kids that are killed that aren't in these types of scenarios where race baiters and race pimps like you appear. Those are the things that you should be caring about. I bet you don't care about these neighborhoods once you leave, when you start problems, or the money that has to be paid to restore them when people like you leave. You're just you're a sucker that's going around this country starting problems, not caring about what happens after the fact because it's giving you a bit of notoriety. You should just admit that. You're a race pimp.
So, Kevin, have you been to the funerals of all the victims of Sandy Hook or all the victims of Katrina?
I wouldn't have to go to any. I'm not a professional. I'm not a professional running around the country earning money to get this nonsense, to do this nonsense. I'm not running around the country doing this.
Kevin, you should stop yelling.
I want you to answer the question.
You want me to fit into this narrative. No, I've answered the question many times, and I'll say it again to you, is that I'm going to places like many other people where the police have killed people, where the police have killed people.
You're getting paid.
Do you believe a person is innocent until proven guilty?
Do you go where people protect? Do you go where the police protect people?
Do you believe cops are innocent until proven guilty? Do you believe people are innocent?
What I believe is that that girl should not have been abused, that Mike Brown should be alive, Freddie Gray should be alive. So I'm looking for the justice system to actually be just.
You don't care what the justice says. All right, I got to roll. Thank you both. Coming up, shocking.
Call for white people like myself to put ourselves in the shoes of those African-American families who fear every time their children go somewhere, who have to have the talk about, how to really protect themselves when they're the ones who should be expecting protection from encounters with the police.